who's not compassionate for the plight of the poor and people who have fallen on hard times. I believe that the majority of people who have entered the shelter system were the working poor who are living one paycheck away from becoming homeless, and I believe that the city failed those families, those women and children and those families, to prevent them from entering the shelter system, because we did not step in after Albany and the city of New York completely defunded the Section 8 program and the Advantage program and the real rental subsidy program that allowed people to live in their own apartments independently with dignity, and we were helping them pay their rent in exchange they were working. It was a great program. It ended in 2011, and you can see the spike in homelessness from 2012 to today because the people can't afford the rents. They can't afford $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 a month, depending on how many children they have and where they live. The city of New York came up with this Lynx voucher system. The landlords don't even want to take it. Okay, the landlords don't want to take the Lynx voucher. It runs out after a year in some instances. There's no work requirement. There's a lot of reasons why landlords don't want to accept the Lynx voucher. But we have to bring back, and we need Albany's help for this. And this is where, I wish the mayor and the governor would kiss and make up and work together on this issue, because we used to fund it half and half. The city of New York put in $750 million. Albany put in $750 million. And then there was this game of chicken that we play in the budget dance, and Phil remembers because he was there at the time. And I think there were some folks in Albany that said, Bloomberg will never let this program go away. It's too valued. It's too important. Let's cut the funding and let him pick up the tab. And then Bloomberg cut off the tab and said, if Albany's not going to fund it, they'll never let it go away. And, of course, we both zeroed it out, the city and the state. We never brought it back. When we didn't bring it back, people got evicted from their apartments. The majority of people who are entering the shelter system are not coming out of Rikers Island, are not mentally ill or addicted to drugs or alcohol or have other issues. These are working poor people, low-income New Yorkers who can't afford the high rents in the city. And by the way, as a fiscally conservative person, and I say that very proudly, I would much rather give a family a $1,500 a month rental subsidy to help them live in an apartment close to their family and friends and in their community where they have transportation and access to services, their kids can stay in their school that they go to, as opposed to paying $3,000 a month, which is what the city spends now to put them in the Holiday Inn or one of the motels and hotels. We're spending twice as much money to put people in hotels and motels far away from their families with no access to services, transportation, or jobs, plucking kids out of their school community. We're spending twice as much money as we would be spending if we just gave that person a real rental subsidy voucher to say, here you go, we're here to help you, we'll pay 2/3 of the rent, you got to come up with the other third, you got to work, and you have to abide by these rules. It was a very successful program. We need to bring it back. No one is talking about that. The other thing we need to do, quite frankly, is we need to build more affordable housing, especially for our seniors, because another subset of that population is senior citizens, who are going into the shelter system. They're widows, their husbands died, their kids moved far away, they couldn't afford to stay in their apartments. There are senior citizens, people who dedicated their whole lives to this city, going into the shelter system right now. All right? And the mayor, by the way, we have a legal obligation under the Callahan Consent Decree to provide shelter for New Yorkers in need. So that's a legal requirement that we have to abide by. But I believe that the mayor and the administration need to work more closely with the communities where some of these shelters are being placed. You can't announce after the fact where they're going. You need to work with the elected officials, the community board, and say, hey, we have in the shelter system 189 families that we need to shelter. Can you help us find a location? We'll give you 30 or 60 days to find one. And if you don't find us a good location, we're going to have to go out and find one ourselves, because we all have to do our fair share to help New Yorkers in need and the homeless. I am never one of those people that attacks homeless people. I think it's wrong. I think it's in poor taste. I'll attack hopeless homeless policies. I'll attack the mayor. I'll attack things that I think are bad or don't help homeless people, but I will never attack or protest a homeless shelter, homeless families, because it could happen to anybody. It really could happen to anybody, and I mean that. And it happened in my own family. I won't get into too many details, but it did happen in my own family, and it can happen to any one of us. You'd be surprised. You lose your job, the mortgage goes underwater, you know, something happens in life, you know, a tragedy, somebody passes away, next thing you know, you're sleeping on Borden Avenue somewhere. I have compassion as a human being for homeless people. I want to get them the help and the housing that they deserve, but we're not doing them any good when we're putting them up in the Holiday Inn for twice the amount of money. Let's find them permanent, affordable housing, stable housing, and help those families who need it the most. And also, by the way, we give so many tax breaks away to developers in this city, right, through various programs and initiatives, because we want to build, you know, all these fancy buildings in Long Island City and in other places, and that's great for tax base, I guess. But in exchange, I think that these individuals have an obligation to help us alleviate the crisis in the shelter system, to take out of the shelter system the people who are not mentally ill or addicted to drugs and not a danger to anybody else. Let's get them set aside in those buildings as well and give them priority in other affordable housing units that we're building. They deserve it.
One other question that I'd like to ask, and I guess this might be a hard one, okay? Transportation, which is a very big issue in Rockaway. As you're well aware, I don't have to tell you the A train sucks. Plain English, it's an abomination. We've been working for years to try to reactivate the old Rockaway Beach line of the railroad. I almost had you where you said yes, okay? Where do you stand at this point
I'm
supporting the reactivation?
I'm sorry to let you down. It was Goldfeder who converted me. And it was, no, I'm just teasing. No, Lou has been working on this a long time. But this is, Phil Goldfeder actually, you know, he talked a lot of sense into me. And he said, Eric, you've got to support this. I know we don't have an exact price tag on it yet. He's like, but the MTA is wasting billions and billions of dollars on projects that we don't even know, you know, how long these projects are taking and the cost overruns. And he actually sat down and showed me, because he was very involved on the Transportation Committee in the Assembly, and he would bring back the reports, because they have to issue these, is it quarterly reports or twice a year reports the MTA had to provide to the members of the legislature. And when I looked through this book, I said, this is ridiculous. And when he said that, I said, you know, if we can waste millions of dollars, you know, building escalators that don't work, all right, for subway stations that don't need them, quite frankly, because there's, you know, 15 people swiping every day. You know, I think we can over the long term build the financial support, and even if we have to float a bond, you know, sitting on Crossbay Boulevard, William Boulevard in traffic every day, seeing the long lines for the ferry. As Lou said, the 8 train stinks. I just took it today. It's horrible. I think we need more transportation options. We've got to get a real plan together, put a price tag on it. When we do that, I'll support the reactivation of the Rockaway Beach line, because it's going to get my constituents not only to other parts of the borough, but into the city, and that's what we need. We're starving. We're starving for more transportation options. We need them. And it's not just the Rockaway Beach Rail Line. That's a big part of it, but we need more express bus service. We wanted City Bike. They wouldn't give us City Bike. Remember, we had that protest on the budget. We want more forms of transportation in the city. We're starving in the outer boroughs. We don't have the luxury of people in Manhattan who have subways running under their feet, buses running, you know, on almost every block. We don't have that. We're starving for transportation. And if we do it, by the way, and we're going to build it, we need to make it accessible for people with disabilities. Okay, we absolutely have to make it accessible for people with disabilities and for older New Yorkers who are physically impaired somehow, because there are too many subway stations and public transportation hubs that we have that are simply shut out for people with disabilities, and they can't get on them. And the answer from the city should not be, oh, just call Assessor Right. That's a nightmare for a lot of people, okay? So that should not be the answer. We have to build and we have to expand public transportation, but we have to make it accessible for all New Yorkers, not just, you know, people that can afford it or people that can ride it. Yeah.
I'd like to take a couple of
Oh,
questions
I'd love to,
from
yeah.
the audience, because we have 2 more candidates that just texted me within 15 minutes. Sorry, because I did say we'd be here till at least 10:30, 11. So, you have a question?
I'm glad I got here early.
Okay, Glenn, you have a question?
Glenn DeResto.
Since you're you oppose overdevelopment.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's something development is coming for the Rockaways a lot.
Right.
And as public advocate, obviously you support affordable housing. I support affordable housing. I believe it needs to be done right.
Right.
So there's a developer who's looking to develop the prior Peninsula Hospital site. It's only 10 acres. They're looking to put 2,200 units of about 5,500 people on only 10 acres. Transportation stinks here.
Yeah.
They're looking to put lower income people there, which is fine, I get it, but I think you need a balance of income, and if you're able to balance out income, it will work as opposed to, it looks like the city wants to do what they did years ago and warehouse poor people here with no jobs. There's no jobs. Even if they open up stores there, stuff, that's only going to create a handful of jobs. You're talking about 5,500 people that they're looking to move there. If it's developed with the amount of units and 15-story buildings, I'm opposed to it. I think a lot of people in the community are opposed to it. I want to know, as someone who is a council member and sitting on the council currently, and if you were an advocate, that'd be great. We hope that you'd be an advocate and oppose the current plan. We know it's going to be housing. We know there's going to be an affordable component to it. I want to know that you would help support and oppose the current plan as it is and help come up with a solution with the developer, Councilman Richards, who I know you're friendly with, to come up with a better plan.
So the one advantage that the public advocate has is they have a seat on the City Planning Commission, and all of the rezonings come before the City Planning Commission. And I believe that if we can decentralize the structure of the office of public advocate, I want to have a deputy public advocate for every borough. And that deputy public advocate for Queens, for instance, would have to go to all the community board meetings and some of the community council, education council meetings, and attend various meetings, and then report back to us in Manhattan, hey, this is what's going on in the Bronx, this is what's going on in Queens. The deputy public advocate that we would appoint for Queens would be someone who's intimately involved in these land use issues, that could advise me so that by the time I go to city planning, I could either voice an objection, I could ask questions from the developer that maybe other people aren't asking at the time, and we can address some of the unintended consequences of overdevelopment and the desire on the part of the builders to make money and make a profit. Okay. The Peninsula Hospital issue is a very thorny one, as you know. I mean, we were all involved in the protests at the time. We were very disappointed that the state decided to close that. The elected officials, I think that was one of those issues that just brought everybody together. We realized how important every single night, that was how important that institution, that facility was and should be to this community. The fact that they want to develop this into a major residential complex, I think, presents a lot of challenges. Okay, as you mentioned, the transportation stinks. The schools, exactly. Okay, the infrastructure, Phil is already rattling. I don't even have to say it. I just hand the mic to him. But the schools, the infrastructure, the transportation, the parking issues that are going to be associated this year, no jobs, well, not to say no jobs, but lack of jobs in the area. Why the city would allow something so big, is something that I could never understand. And they're not doing it just in Far Rockaway. They're doing it in so many other parts of the city. And sometimes they're even overruling the local community board and the local council member, because if the zoning allows for it, it's as of right. And you can have all the protests in the world. You can have all the elected officials out there. There's nothing that we can do about it because they already cut their deal with HPD. Or they already cut their deal with the BSA or city planning if they were going for a variance, for instance. But this is where I think the local community boards and the local communities can really play a very important role in assisting the public advocate to slow down these projects, to scale down these projects, and to fight over development. I'm not against development. I want more housing, and I want more jobs, and I'm all for it. But I want responsible development. I don't want overdevelopment. I want community-based planning and responsible development where communities can absorb new residents and plan in the future to make sure that we have the seats in the schools, that the MTA is giving us the service, the transportation service that we need, the bus service, the train service, that the roads are being fixed, that the parking is being provided, that we are actually planning in a responsible way, not just allowing the cranes and the bulldozers to show up and people to make money, and then they leave and collect the rent, and then we're stuck with all the consequences. That's not smart planning. That's not smart planning. And I don't think that the people in our community are going to benefit from that. Mr. Silverman.
I think everybody